Hi, Mr. Scheinman. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
How does
It's
it feel to be back at Menlo after so long?
feels good. It's been a long time. The school looks a lot different than it did when I was here so many years ago. It's crazy to think it's been 2 decades, but it's great to be back.
It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
Um, I'd love to start with just a little bit about yourself, about your background, and a little bit about what Summer Bio is, what it does, how it started.
Sure. So I obviously went to Menlo 20 years ago, and then went on to study mechanical engineering. And when the COVID pandemic started, I felt really helpless. Like I think a lot of us had a lot of fear driven by a sense of helplessness. And I started looking around to think how can I help? What can we do? And looked at a lot of different things and ultimately converged on testing as this great bridge between where we were in the pandemic with a lot of just a big void of knowledge and understanding what was going on and getting us to a place where we could return to a normal life and go back to living life like we did in 2019. And ultimately, we started a company, and as you introduced me and said, we went on to be one of the largest COVID testing labs in the country. We're doing 5 to 10% of the total volume in the U.S. every day, and ultimately, we did about 20 million COVID tests at a street price of $13 a test, and a turnaround time of about 11 hours.
That's incredible. And one thing that I really am wondering is, the COVID pandemic sprouted out of nowhere. How did you start so quickly, and what did it take to expand?
Sure. Like I said, we were looking around trying to figure out how we could help, and we converged on testing as a solution. And very coincidentally, early in my career, I had worked at a company developing laboratory automation equipment. And there was a great community out of that company, a bunch of friends and colleagues that I had made, and we all kind of came together and said, "Hey, I think we could take what we did many years ago, put this together, and stand up a testing system to do this." And none of us had a background in diagnostic testing and biology and virology, any of these things, but we knew how to build automation equipment. And so we literally started buying equipment from anywhere you could find it. At the beginning of the pandemic, you couldn't buy, I mean, everything was sold out. Anything related to testing was unavailable. So we started buying equipment off eBay, bought equipment from random, you know, equipment vendors, from, somebody knew a guy who knew a guy who had equipment in a warehouse, and we just started buying things and putting it together. And within, a few weeks, we had stood up a company, and I think that was sort of what was needed to meet the moment of the pandemic. And I think it was about 2 months we went from an idea to we had an operating, registered, licensed lab running tests. Things move fast.
That's so cool. And so, when looking at Summer Bio in retrospect, what really went right, and what made Summer Bio so successful?
I mean, I think the pandemic was an interesting opportunity or an interesting environment to start a business in that there was a ton of collective alignment over what we wanted to do and where we were trying to go. And we had a very clear vision that we wanted to get the world back to the way things were in 2019. I mean, we all saw that the lockdowns and people being at home and people not going to work and kids not going to school was super detrimental to all of us. And that wasn't a world we wanted to live in. And we're sort of asking the question, how do we do this? And that was a vision that everybody could get behind, and it was clear what we needed to do. And when you get everybody on the same page, we're able to move incredibly quickly in the same direction. And that was a feeling not only within SummerBio, but I mean globally. It was an incredible time to do business and to work. That the whole world, anybody working in this space, was so focused on how do we fix things, how do we make things better, how do we get everybody back to a great place. And it was just an incredible time to work on a project like that. So.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that, in a time like COVID where everybody was, staying at home, stopping work, that you guys came together and started something really meaningful. And I think as we look at COVID, as we all know, schools were very badly hit by COVID. And so tell us a little bit about how Summer Bio enabled one of the largest school districts in the country to actually stay open.
Yeah, so as we, looked at our vision and what we wanted to do, it started to become clear that companies and businesses were going to figure out how to keep doing their business. And they were going to figure out testing solutions for their employees, figure out testing solutions for their staff and get back to business. But schools didn't have the resources, didn't have, what was required to do that. And it became clear that if kids weren't back in school, parents weren't going to go back to a normal life, and none of us were going to get back to a normal life. And the long-term effects of kids not being in school, we all knew was going to be, big. So we really wanted to help in the biggest way possible, and school seemed like a way to do that. So we started hunting around for large educational organizations to work with, and we ended up working with a bunch of school districts and universities, but ultimately the Los Angeles School District was our biggest customer and our biggest partner in this. I mean, they had a vision early on that they really needed to keep the schools open, they needed to keep the schools safe, and they needed to keep kids coming to school, that kids sitting at home wasn't good for anybody. And the amount of effort and energy and vision that the LA School District had was just incredible to see such a big organization completely pivot themselves around saying, like, we've got this challenge and our number one goal is get kids back here. And it was, I mean, they're a huge organization and they just had an incredible leadership that was sort of laser focused on, we got to keep kids in school and learning and safe. And so we worked really closely with the LA School District. They mobilized their whole team. They had, bus drivers moving supplies around. They had, people administering tests that had never even knew what a test was. I mean, and they were training them, teaching them, and making it all happen. I mean, it was incredible to see them do it. And on our half of it, we didn't really expect to. When we set up the company, we didn't know where our customer base was going to end up with, and coincidentally, it ended up in LA. And we set up our lab right here in Menlo Park. And so to bridge that gap, we ended up buying an airplane so that we could move samples between LA and our lab twice a day. So we were running 2 flights a day from LA, bringing samples up here. But it was just the LA School District was just an incredible partner to work with. It was an amazing thing to see. And I had never worked with school districts. Like, it just was the whole corner of the world I wasn't familiar with. But it was
Yeah,
really cool.
it's definitely like an incredible accomplishment to do something that big. And so finally, I think there's no way anyone could have been prepared for tackling a problem like COVID. And so when looking back over your life and your life experiences, what do you think prepared you best for all the incredible success that SummerBio brought to the world?
I mean, like you said, there's nobody predicted COVID. Nobody knew that was going to happen and how that whole pandemic was going to unfold. And going into the pandemic, the last biology class I had ever taken was actually here at Menlo when I was probably 15. I think when I was here, they did, I think it was biochem and then chem bio. There's a split series there. And that was the last biology I had ever taken. And, but I think I had followed a career that was driven by my passions and my interests, which was engineering. And I was able to come to the table with a deep understanding of what I did, and a ton of other passionate, motivated people showed up at the table and said, like, we also want to help, and we're gonna come together and do this collectively. And I personally got a education by fire in biology and diagnostic testing that I had never expected, and everyone else that sat around the table, I think, got an equivalent education in all the other disciplines that were involved. I mean, the broad set of skills required to pull off what we did was immense. I mean, we had amazing scientists that sort of figured out the underlying science of how to do the PCR testing that we were doing. Amazing engineers that were automating the whole process, and then the supply chain and operations that went behind the whole thing was just unfathomable. Like the flow of supplies required to keep a lab going, we were doing 100 to 150,000 tests a day, and so it's just, I mean, we had trucks every day showing up with materials, and then we had a dedicated team that was there. The lab was running 24 hours a day running tests, and so there was just a unbelievable committed set of clinicians in the lab just cranking out tests. So I think, to your question of what prepared me for this, I think, following my passions and being able to show up and really be a subject matter expert was super helpful. But I think also, it took a lot of leadership, and it took a lot of herding of people of disparate backgrounds to come together to do something great together.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Mr. Scheinman, for coming back and sharing your incredible thoughts with us.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.